If you fill a balloon with helium, a substance lighter than the nitrogen, oxygen, and other elements which compose the air around it, the balloon will immediately fly upwards. If you fill a balloon with hydrogen, a substance even lighter than helium, the balloon will fly upwards even faster. If you blow a dandelion seed out of your hands, a substance just barely heavier than the air, it will float away and slowly but eventually fall to the ground. And if you drop an anvil from your hands, something much heavier than the air, it will quickly and directly fall straight to the ground. Now this has absolutely nothing to do with gravity. The fact that light things rise up and heavy things fall down is simply a natural property of weight and density. That is very different from gravity. Gravity is a hypothetical magnetic-like force possessed by large masses which Isaac Newton needed to help explain the heliocentric theory of the universe. Lady Blunt says, most people in England have either read or heard that Sir Isaac Newton's theory of gravitation was originated by his seeing an apple fall to the earth from a tree in his garden. Persons gifted with ordinary common sense would say that the apple fell down to earth because, bulk for bulk, it was heavier than the surrounding air. But if, instead of the apple, a fluffy feather had been detached from the tree, a breeze would probably have sent the feather floating away, and the feather would not reach the earth until the surrounding air became so still that, by virtue of its own density, the feather would fall to the ground. Wilbur Voliva, a famous flat earther in the early 20th century, gave lectures all over America against Newtonian astronomy. He would begin by walking on stage with a book, a balloon, a feather, and a brick, and ask the audience, how is it that a law of gravitation can pull up a toy balloon and cannot put up a brick? I throw up this book. Why doesn't it go on up? That book went up as far as the force behind it forced it, and it fell because it was heavier than the air, and that is the only reason. I cut the string of a toy balloon. It rises, gets to a certain height, and then it begins to settle. I take this brick and a feather. I blow the feather. Yonder it goes. Finally, it begins to settle and comes down. This brick goes up as far as the force forces it, and then it comes down because it is heavier than the air. That is all. David Wardlaw Scott says, any object which is heavier than the air, and which is unsupported, has a natural tendency to fall by its own weight. Newton's famous apple at Woolsthorpe, or any other apple when ripe, loses hold of its stalk, and being heavier than the air, drops as a matter of necessity to the ground, totally irrespective of any attraction of the earth. For if such attraction existed, why does not the earth attract the rising smoke, which is not nearly so heavy as the apple? The answer is simple, because the smoke is lighter than the air, and therefore does not fall but ascends. Gravitation is only a subterfuge employed by Newton in his attempt to prove that the earth revolves around the sun, and the quicker it is relegated to the tomb of all the Capulets, the better will it be for all classes of society. Thomas Winship says, the law of gravitation is said by the advocates of the Newtonian system of astronomy to be the greatest discovery of science, and the foundation of the whole of modern astronomy. If, therefore, it can be shown that gravitation is a pure assumption, and an imagination of the mind only, that it has no existence outside of the brains of its expounders and advocates, the whole of the hypothesis of this modern so-called science fall to the ground as flat as the surface of the ocean, and this most exact of all sciences, this wonderful feat of the intellect, becomes at once the most ridiculous superstition and the most gigantic imposture to which ignorance and credulity could ever be exposed. Einstein's theory of relativity and the entire heliocentric model of the universe hinge upon Newton's law of gravitation. Heliocentrists claim that the sun is the most massive object in the heavens, more massive even than the earth, and therefore the earth and other planets, by law, are caught up in the sun's gravity and forced to orbit perpetual circles and ellipses around it. They claim that gravity also somehow allows people, buildings, the oceans, and all of nature to exist on the underside of their ball earth without falling off. Now, even if gravity did exist, why would it cause both planets to orbit the sun and people to stick to the earth? Gravity should either cause people to float in suspended circular orbits around the earth, or it should cause the earth to be pulled and crashed into the sun. What sort of magic is gravity that it can glue people's feet to the ball earth while causing earth itself to revolve ellipses around the sun? The two effects are very different, yet the same cause is attributed to both. Furthermore, This magnetic-like attraction of massive objects gravity is purported to have can be found nowhere in the natural world. There is no example in nature of a massive sphere or any other shaped object which, by virtue of its mass alone, causes smaller objects to stick to or orbit around it. There is nothing on Earth massive enough that it can be shown to cause even a dust bunny to stick to or orbit around it. Try spinning a wet tennis ball or any other spherical object with smaller things placed on its surface, and you will find that everything falls or flies off, and nothing sticks to or orbits around it. To claim the existence of a physical law without a single practical evidential example is hearsay, not science. Lady Blunt and Albert Smith wrote, "That bodies in some instances are seen to approach each other is a fact, but that their mutual approach is due to an attraction or pulling process on the part of these bodies is, after all, a mere theory. Hypotheses may sometimes be admissible, but when they are invented to support other hypotheses, they are not only to be doubted, but discredited and discarded. The hypothesis of a universal force called gravitation is based upon, and was indeed invented with a view to support another hypothesis, namely that the earth and sea together make up a vast globe whirling away through space, and therefore needing some force or forces to guide it in its mad career, and so control it as to make it conform to what is called its annual orbit round the sun. The theory, first of all, makes the earth to be a globe, then not a perfect globe, but an oblate spheroid, flattened at the poles, then more oblate, until it was in danger of becoming so flattened that it would be like a cheese, and passing over minor variations of form, we are finally told that the earth is pear-shaped, and that the ellipsoid has been replaced by an apoid. What shape it may assume next, we cannot tell. It will depend upon the whim or fancy of some astute and speculating scientist."